Thank you. It is great to be here on Airstrip 1, forward operating base of the American Empire and land of my forefathers. You've been very useful lately in Oceania's eternal war against West Asia. Of course, we've always been at war with Eurasia, too. Should this house, Oxford, England, the West, fight a war with Russia over Ukraine? Well, whatever happened to the line that Ukraine can surely win this war themselves with just a little bit of weapons and money from us? They'll take back every square inch, including Crimea, they said. That was 4 years ago. That was a lie. I speak for all Americans. You don't count, Freed. The answer is no. Haven't y'all seen Threads? War with Russia means the entire United Kingdom would be destroyed by hydrogen bombs. London would be gone. Oxford, which I've come to learn is the oldest university in the world, would be gone. You'll be burning Empire Strikes Back action figures for cooking fuel. Does anyone believe that the entire UK army could defeat Russia in a conventional war? Give me a break. You mean the United States of America should do it for you. NATO, America's military alliance on the continent, whose expansion helped cause this war in the first place, creates a terrible moral hazard. For example, in 2022, Lithuania closed the Suwalki corridor between Belarus and Russian Kaliningrad. Defense official Laurinas Kasiunis told the New York Times that retaliation by Russia was, quote, unlikely because Lithuania is a member of NATO. If this were not the case, they probably would consider it, end quote. Well, I've got news for you, Lithuanians. We're not willing to fight for you either. Besides, the entire myth of U.S. conventional military supremacy has just been completely destroyed by Trump's failure in Iran. It's time to get a new foreign policy, one of your own. In 2018, a New York Times reporter named Keith Gesson interviewed Strobe Talbott, Bill Clinton's Deputy Secretary of State, who had been an opponent of NATO expansion before he championed it. And at that time, 4 years into the ongoing Civil War, it was beyond question that it was American policy that had helped to provoke the conflict. And when Keith Gesson confronted Strobe Talbott with that fact and said, so, how's your NATO expansion going for you now? He didn't dispute. Instead, Talbott said, listen, when you're in power, you have one object. You must pursue the national interest. And if you don't do that, well, then you won't be in power very long. But then he mused, Talbott did. He said, should we have had a higher, wiser conception of our national interest? Maybe. In other words, should they have concerned themselves with the possibility that they were scheduling a military conflict with Russia for the 21st century? Or should they focus on collecting Lockheed dollars and Polish votes in Illinois for their re-election campaign in 1996? They chose the lower, dumber conception of American national interests. Mr. Freed, at that time, was part of what they called the pro-expansion troika on the National Security Council with Alexander Vershbow and Nicholas Burns. They worked to weaken the Partnership for Peace, which included Russia, and ensure that it could never join NATO, which they were determined to expand to Russia's western border. They were warned by George Kennan, Pat Buchanan, Brent Scowcroft, and many others. They were simply sowing the seeds of future conflict with Russia. In 2004, Freed played a crucial role in the second round of NATO expansion as well, and pushed to include Ukraine too. On September the 1st, 2005, in a document posted on WikiLeaks.org, Freed admitted to a French diplomat that Ukraine was severely divided on the question of NATO membership, but played down the threat of a civil or Russia-Ukraine war. He's here tonight to say that you should die in that war that he promised wouldn't happen. In 2008, when George W. Bush was considering inviting Ukraine to join the NATO alliance, America's ambassador to Russia, Nicholas Burns, wrote a memo to Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice called "Niet means Niet." Again, you can read it at wikileaks.org. And in there, he says that he talked to everyone in foreign policy circles in Russia, from the most enlightened liberal to the most reactionary knuckle-draggers, and they all agreed that NATO membership for Ukraine was, quote, the brightest of red lines. Georgia was too much, but Ukraine was unthinkable. He quoted Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov of saying that if America brings Ukraine into NATO, it could cause a civil war. And then Russia would be faced with the dilemma of whether or not to intervene, a decision they did not want to have to make. Rice and Bush ignored Burns and his good advice and Lavrov's warning. And even though the Germans and the French would not allow a full membership action plan, still announced that Ukraine was on the path to NATO membership. In a way, it was the worst of both worlds, or the worst of all worlds, since they were provoking the Russians, but without providing the war guarantee that would be said to deter them, although it might have only caused the war to happen sooner. In 2019, the Rand Corporation put out a study called Extending Russia, by which they meant how to provoke Russia into overexpansion to commitments that they cannot afford. And one of the things that they said was, well, we could pour more weapons into Ukraine, and that would drive up Russia's costs. But then in a big disclaimer, they said, don't do that. Don't listen to us. If you do, then there's a very real chance that Russia will go ahead and invade and take back its former provinces in Ukraine's east, which would be a tremendous cost to the United States in terms of power, prestige, and probably money, and of course would be deadly to our Ukrainian friends. Hundreds of thousands killed, hundreds of billions of dollars wasted, and Ukraine destroyed are the results of the Donald Trump administration and Joe Biden going on ahead anyway. The strategic defeat that the Biden administration promised has been our own. We are now backing Nazis against Russia. No, they're not all Nazis, but if you look back in history, America supported even the communist USSR against Nazi Germany. Now we're supporting Nazis in a war against Republican Russia? It makes no sense. And for all you deniers, I'll urge you to keep your eye on General Andriy Beletsky, the leader of the 3rd Army Corps, formerly known as the Azov Battalion. He's the guy you always see quoted saying we must lead the white races against the Semitic-led Untermenschen in his speech, Racial National Socialism. Oh, sorry, it's the exact opposite, social nationalism, get it? In a speech that he gave in 2007. And he has political ambitions. He very well could be called the country's Führer before too long. Oi! Empire is murder-suicide, isn't it? You're English, you know that. The U.S.'s national debt is now $40 trillion. We pay more in interest than for the annual cost of the empire itself. The game is over. If the UK wishes to try it again, be our guest. But just stay out of the new world. James Monroe's doctrine warned, but also promised that the United States would stay out of the old world too. The last time full-scale war broke out in Europe, it was the worst thing that ever happened. If we go to war with Russia, the West will be destroyed along with them. No one will be left to complain about what a mistake it was. Even though Robert Kagan, neoconservative ringleader and husband of Victoria Nuland, who played such a role in getting us into this mess, pointed out that actually, now that you think about it, it really doesn't matter to American national interests whatsoever who controls Ukraine. It didn't matter throughout the entire Cold War. And his wife, Victoria Nuland, admitted that actually it turns out that Russia's a paper tiger. They can't even take all of eastern Ukraine, much less eastern or much less Western Europe. Give us a break. Don't listen to the war party's lies. No one cares who rules Dnipropetrovsk, and we're certainly not willing to die for it. Instead, we should rejoin the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, the New START Treaty, the INF Treaty, and Open Skies Treaties, and leave NATO and come home from Europe permanently. We need peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none. Thank you.